On the night of May 13, 1862, an enslaved man walked to the helm of a Confederate warship. He put on the captain's hat. He gave the correct signal codes to 5 Confederate forts. He sailed past Fort Sumter in complete darkness and delivered the ship to the Union Navy. But here is what most people miss when they tell this story. This was not a desperate gamble. This was not luck. This was a military operation planned with such precision, such intelligence, and such brilliance that it should be studied in academies around the world. His name was Robert Smalls, and history called him a slave. He proved he was a genius. Robert Smalls was born in 1839 in Beaufort, South Carolina. Not free, not protected, enslaved. He entered a world that had already decided his worth. His labor belonged to someone else. His future belonged to someone else. His very life belonged to someone else. But his mind was always his own. And it was extraordinary. The enslaved system that sought to control Robert Smalls gave him something it never intended: an education. Because Robert was forced to work on ships, he learned to navigate, to read tides, to understand weather patterns, to master the waterways of South Carolina. He learned how ships moved, how they were crewed, how they were commanded. He learned the language of the sea. And he stored every single lesson away. Not because someone told him to. Because he already knew that knowledge was power. And power was freedom. Then came the assignment that changed history. Robert was assigned to work aboard the CSS Planter, a Confederate transport ship and gunboat, one of the most important vessels in Charleston Harbor. It carried supplies, transported troops, and most importantly, it knew things: the routes, the protocols, the signal codes, the passwords that would let a ship pass Confederate forts without being fired upon. Robert Smalls studied everything. He was not just a crew member. He was gathering intelligence. This is the part of Robert Smalls' story that most people never tell. The months before the escape. Because Robert did not simply decide one night to steal the ship and hope for the best. He watched. He listened. He memorized. He planned. He observed the Confederate captain's behavior patterns. When he came aboard. When he left. How long he was typically gone. He memorized the signal flags used to communicate with each Confederate fort. The correct sequences. The timing. The responses expected. He studied the tides. The best time of night to move. When sentinels were least alert. He mapped the route in his mind. Every fort. Every checkpoint. Every point of danger. He identified who among the crew and nearby enslaved people he could trust. He planned for success. And he planned for failure. Backup routes. Cover stories. Contingencies. This was not a desperate gamble. This was military planning of the highest order. Carried out by a man who was not supposed to be capable of it. Then came one of the most difficult parts. Recruiting others. Robert carefully approached a small number of enslaved people he trusted completely. He explained the plan. The risk. The reward. They agreed. And then something remarkable happened. In a world where fear and the threat of betrayal were constant, the secret held. Nobody talked. Nobody broke under pressure. Nobody went to the Confederate authorities. That speaks to Robert's extraordinary ability to read people. To build trust. To lead. That is not luck. That is leadership. Then came the night. May 13, 1862. The Confederate captain and white crew members had gone ashore. A normal occurrence. Not suspicious. But Robert Smalls had been watching. Waiting. Planning for exactly this moment. This was it. He gathered his team. Calm. Focused. Precise. No panic. No chaos. No hesitation. Every person knew their role. Every step had been rehearsed mentally 100 times. Robert walked to the helm. He put on the captain's wide-brimmed hat. Pulled it low. From a distance in the darkness of the harbor, he needed to look like the captain. He needed to look like a white man. His life and the lives of everyone aboard depended on it. The planter began to move. Quietly. Purposefully. Through the dark waters of Charleston Harbor. At each Confederate checkpoint, Robert gave the correct signal. The precise sequence of flags and sounds that said, "We are authorized. We are Confederate. Let us pass." Fort after fort responded. No alarm. No challenge. No suspicion. Just a ship moving through the night with the quiet authority of a vessel that belonged there. Because Robert Smalls had done his homework. He knew every signal. Every protocol. Every expected response. 5 Confederate checkpoints. 5 opportunities to be discovered. 5 opportunities to be killed. And 5 perfect performances. Then came Fort Sumter. The most famous Confederate fortification in America. The fort where the Civil War had begun. Robert Smalls approached it in the darkness. His hat pulled low. His posture matching the captain's. He gave the signal. The fort responded. The planter was allowed to pass. Imagine that moment. Sailing past the most heavily guarded Confederate position in the harbor. In the dark. On a stolen Confederate warship. While dressed as the white captain. Every heart beat loud in the silence. Every second stretching into eternity. And then Fort Sumter was behind them. Ahead was the Union blockade. Ahead was freedom. As the planter approached the Union lines, Robert raised the white flag. A symbol of peace. A signal that this was not an attack. The Union Navy was initially suspicious. An approaching Confederate warship in the dark could easily be a trick. But Robert Smalls had planned for this too. He identified himself. Explained what he had done. And delivered the CSS Planter, a fully armed Confederate gunboat with its weapons intact, its codes and its charts, into Union hands. The military intelligence alone was extraordinary. But Robert Smalls had also freed 16 enslaved people that night. Including his own family. His wife. His children. He had gone back for them before sailing. Because the plan was never just about the ship. It was about freedom. The Union was stunned. Not just by the audacity of what Robert Smalls had done. But by the intelligence he brought with him. The Confederate signal codes. The harbor maps. The knowledge of Confederate positions and protocols. This was information the Union desperately needed. Robert Smalls was celebrated. Awarded prize money. Praised in newspapers across the North. And then he did something even more remarkable. He went to Washington. He met with Abraham Lincoln and Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. And he argued with quiet, brilliant conviction that enslaved black men should be allowed to fight for the Union. His argument was simple and irrefutable. We have already been fighting for this country in ways you have not acknowledged. Now let us fight openly. Lincoln and Stanton listened. Shortly after, black men were formally allowed to join the Union Army. Robert Smalls did not just steal a ship. He helped change the composition of the entire Union military. After the war, Robert Smalls returned to Beaufort, South Carolina. And he did something that history should celebrate far more than it does. The house where he had been enslaved was put up for auction. Robert Smalls bought it. The man who had been considered property inside those walls bought the building outright. He made it his home. Later, when the widow of his former enslaver fell into poverty, Robert Smalls allowed her to live in the house until she died. He showed her the same mercy she and her family had never shown him. That is not weakness. That is moral superiority. That is the character of an extraordinary human being. But Robert Smalls was not finished. He entered politics. And he served 5 terms in the United States Congress. The same man who had been enslaved, who had been told he was property, who had been denied every right a human being deserves, served as a representative of the American people. In Congress he fought for education, for civil rights, for the protection of Black Americans in the post-war South. His mind, the same mind that had planned every detail of the planter escape, now worked on the laws of the nation he had helped save. From enslaved person to naval hero to congressman. No Hollywood script would dare write that story, because it would seem too unbelievable. But it happened. So why do so few people know his name? Because after Reconstruction ended, a deliberate effort was made to minimize the achievements of Black Americans during the Civil War era. The story of Robert Smalls was inconvenient. It directly challenged the narrative that enslaved people were incapable of strategic thinking, of leadership, of brilliance. So his story faded. His name disappeared from textbooks. His achievements were credited to others or simply not mentioned at all. The most brilliant military intelligence operation of the Civil War era was carried out by an enslaved man. And history decided not to teach you about it. Today Robert Smalls is slowly being reclaimed. A statue in Beaufort, South Carolina honors him. Books and documentaries have begun to tell his story. A new generation is discovering what was always true. That Robert Smalls was not a footnote in Civil War history. He was one of its most important figures. A man of extraordinary intelligence, courage, leadership, and moral strength, who proved that the system that tried to define his worth was wrong about everything. History called him a slave. He called himself free. He stole a warship, freed his family, changed the course of a war, bought his enslaver's house, and served his country in Congress. With nothing but his mind, his courage, and an unshakable belief that he was worth more than the world had been willing to admit. Robert Smalls, the military genius history tried to forget. If you had been in Robert Smalls' position, would you have had the courage and the brilliance to execute a plan like his? Drop your answer in the comments below. And subscribe to Unveiled History, because the truth is always more powerful than the myth.